Hey guys, welcome to Tech Time with Zach. Today I'm going to walk you through pivot tables, how to create them, how to analyze the data in your Excel spreadsheets in order to be able to make sense of the data that you currently have and make better business decisions. Guys, let's go ahead and start putting this data into a pivot table. So as you'll see here, I've collected some data online. This is economic activity data from 2010 to 2018. And the data that was provided to me had three different columns. The first column was the year column, and this has all the years from 2010 to 2018. The second column is all the economic activity. And the third column is the production in millions of US dollars. So let's go ahead and put this into a pivot table. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my box over here to A1, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to hit Control Shift left arrow, and that's going to bring it over from A to C and grab all the different headers that I have. And then I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I'm going to hit the down arrow. So Control Shift down arrow, and that's going to bring in all rows of the data. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and go to Insert here and insert a pivot table. So I'm going to click Pivot Table here, and it gives me this pivot table box comes up, and this gives me some different options. So the first thing you'll see here is this is the range of the data that we have selected, and you can manipulate this by reselecting the different ranges that you want, or you can leave it the way it is. This is good for if you have new data that you're bringing in and your data set gets a little bit longer, or you have an extra column that you're bringing in. You can go ahead and come into this box here and then select the new range of data that you're going to use. The next thing you'll see here is a button for using from an external data source. This is a way for you to connect to an external data source, whether it be like a Microsoft Access or a SQL Server, and bring in data that way through a pivot table. I will be doing a video in a couple weeks when I'm doing SQL tutorials on how to bring data into Excel using Microsoft SQL Server. So we will go over that fully in detail in that video. The other options down here are to choose where to place your pivot table. So now we can either place it in a new worksheet, which I recommend, or you can put it in an existing worksheet, which here you get another table range and you can choose. So if I was to put it in this worksheet, I would put it, I could put it here, I could put it here, and just select a cell on where I want to put it, and then I hit OK, and it'll place that pivot table right here, and you start building it out that way. Or I could just use a new worksheet, and that's what I'm going to utilize here. So with new worksheet selected, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to zoom this in a little bit so everyone can see. And so now we'll see here, I have the pivot table starting in column A, row 3, and this is where our pivot table will start. Now we can insert rows above and or columns to the right of it if we wanted to, but I usually start building it out first, and then I start to position it on my spreadsheet where I want it to be. And we're going to do that when we start talking about slicers here in a few minutes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and bring in the fields that I want to bring in to the pivot table to start building it out here on the spreadsheet. In order to do that, I'm going to come over here to the field list, and in this field list you will see the three columns that we had brought in. First column being the year column, the second column being economic activity, and the third column being production in millions of US dollars. Below that you will see 4 containers, and in each of these containers you can put the different fields that are brought in here. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of them. First of all, let's look at the filter, and if I grab year and I bring it into the filters here, we can see that it gives me a box at the top of the worksheet where I can choose to filter out any year or keep any year in that I want to. And this gives you the ability to manipulate your data to show only the stuff that you want to see in that particular data set. Also, I can bring the years over into columns, and what it will do is it will bring the years into each column. And so you'll see here that we're starting in 2010, column A, column B is 2011, column C is 2012, and column D is 2013. And this gives you the ability to see all the data in each of the columns. So if I was to bring in production in millions of US dollars, the reason you would put it in values is because the number that you're going to be calculating and doing your analysis on, those are your value numbers. If you were to bring it into rows, it would just row out each of those numbers and give you each of those distinct values in the row. You wouldn't want that because you can't do any kind of calculation based on that. The only way to do the calculations based on it is to put it into the values section. So we'll keep it there. And as you can see with the year in columns, it gives you each of those years total sum of production in millions of US dollars in each of those columns. Now, what if I was to bring it into rows here? What it'll do is it'll insert each of those years into a row and then the corresponding value into the column and row next to it. So we're going to leave this here for now and look at it this way. I'm going to bring in one more thing. So now I'm going to bring in economic activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in economic activity into the rows, and it will default there. So I'm going to go ahead and let it default, and I'm just going to click it. So once I clicked it, it brought it in below it. So this is one view you can use. You can use it in the below, or you can bring it above. And I recommend bringing it above because then you can see the different years, or how each of the different economic activities performed between the different years. Now the view we're looking at right now is consider the compact view. And there's other views that we can look in to and use this data in Excel. What we're going to do now is we're going to go up here and go to Pivot Table Design. And when we click on Design, you'll see there's different options over here. You'll see a subtotals option, a grand totals option, a report layout option, and a blank rows option. And this is the ability to insert or remove a blank row after each of the items. I haven't really ever used that before. I haven't found a reason to use it while I'm manipulating my data. The ones that I want to focus on are the subtotals, the grand totals, and the report layout. So subtotals, you will see here there's a subtotal for each of the economic activities, subtotaling up all of the different years for that specific economic activity. So what we'll do is, just to show you the different things, if you hit do not show subtotals, it will just leave that blank and it'll get rid of those subtotals there. If you hit subtotals at the bottom of the group, it will move those subtotals from being up here to being right below. And then obviously if you hit it at the top of the group, it will put it back to that initial view where it shows the subtotals right here on the top of the group. Now, when I'm in the compact form, I like to keep the subtotals right here at the top of the group where I'll be able to see them better. But if I'm going to use a different view, and the other view that I like to use a lot is the tabular view, I will remove the subtotals. So the first thing I would do is I hit do not show subtotals here, we'll remove it there. And then I could come over here to the tabular view. So the compact view is the view that we are currently in. An outline view gives it to you in an outline like format, and then the tabular view is the other one that I mostly use when analyzing my data. So if I click tabular view here, you'll see that it brings the years over into another column. Now the years are still underneath each of the different economic activity categories, but they are brought into another column, so it makes it easier to read. And the times I use tabular is mostly when I have multiple columns into the data set that I'm using. So if I was to bring in like 3 or 4 different columns in here, I would utilize the tabular format to make it a little bit more readable for my readers. The compact format will almost outline it to where you'll have different groupings, one after another, after another, after another, and it could make it a little bit more difficult for people to read than putting it in a tabular format. So it depends on the look and feel of how you want to do it, and really experiment with it with your data to see kind of what works best and how it looks best in these different formats. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to a compact view, and I'm going to show you a couple things with the grand totals. So right now I'm going to actually bring back our subtotals here real quick, and right now you'll see that we have a grand total at the bottom. So this is the grand total for the column. This is your column grand total. Now we can come over here to grand totals and we can say off for rows and columns. If I did that, it will take it away. Same thing here is I can do on for rows only, and it will bring grand totals over to the rows. But you'll notice that it's not going to do it in this view. That is because there's nothing to grand total out in the row. It's just one value. So all you'd see is the same value. But if I move the years into the columns and I scroll up, and I'm just going to hit Control up arrow to get up to the closest thing, you'll see that now I have all the values here in each of the columns. If I scroll over, you'll see now I have a grand total here for each of the rows. So each of these totals is the summation, the aggregation of this entire row. The other thing we can do is we can have both of them on. So if I come back here to grand totals and I put on for rows and columns, you'll see there's a grand total here that grand totals the entire column. And then you can see a grand total here that totals the entire row. Now this is useful for two reasons. One, I can see the grand total of the year 2010 for every single economic activity segment. Now, if I wanted to see the grand total just for accommodation food service activities, I would look at the grand total in the row, and this is the grand total for the accommodation and food service activities. So you'll see that now you have the ability to total up this and aggregate it and see total for this one segment, or you can see for every single category the total here. So this gives you the ability to see more than one thing at a time. For this instance though, I'm going to go ahead and just leave the grand totals on the columns. So I'm going to come back up here to design and I'm going to go to grand totals and I'm going to say on for columns only. And so that's going to leave it here and it's going to remove it from over here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show a variance for these values. But before I do that, I'm going to come here to column labels and I'm going to hit this filter button. And when I hit this, I'm going to go ahead and sort the years by descending order. So now you'll see I have the years coming from 2018 down to 2010. And this is a better view if you're using year-over-year data, because now you're going to use the most current year and look at the data against the previous year, rather than looking at the latest year versus the newest year. You want to look at it this way because now you have the most current year and you can see how you're doing versus the previous year, and then also helps you to see the trend from year over year. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to bring production in millions again down into the values. So now we have two of them. You'll see here we have a sum of production in millions and a sum of production in millions. So we don't get confused, we're going to rename this one here to variance year over year. So YOY is year over year. And you'll notice when I scroll this over a little bit, you'll notice that the variance, once I've changed that one column name for variance, it changed all the corresponding column names. Same thing what we'll do is we'll keep this as production in millions, but instead we're going to take out the sum of. And just so you can see, if I was just to take out the sum of total and hit enter, I'm going to get an error. This error is saying that the name already exists. So you cannot name it the same thing without a little trick, and I'll show you that right now. So in order to keep the same name, if you want to keep it the same name, all you do is just add a space. Once you've added the space, you hit enter and it continues. It's the same name without that sum of in the beginning. If I want to turn this into values, what I'll do is I will select all of the values in this column. I will right click on them and go to number format. Once I'm in number format, I will choose currency and then I will choose how I want it to display. So in this case, I want 2 decimal places. And then I like to use the red parentheses with red for negative values. So I'm going to choose that as well. And I'm going to click OK. And again, it changed everything. Now notice what happened when I did that. The whole entire columns for the pivot table moved. Now we don't want that to happen all the time, because once we get done formatting this and we get it all fixed the way we want it, we don't want to make one little change and then everything go out of whack and get messed up. So in order to make that from happening, we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to right click on the pivot table, anywhere on the pivot table, and we're going to go to pivot table options. Once we're in here, we are going to do a couple things. First, we're going to do error values. So we're going to click on error value as and empty cells as, and we're going to enter zeros here. And this will give us 0 for anything that is empty or has an error in our values data set. Now, what I want to do in layout is I want to uncheck this auto fit column list on update. This will keep the pivot table from adjusting anytime we make a change to any of the data or format anything else. And we're going to leave, in order to continue to keep the way we have the formatting done, we're going to leave it on preserve cell formatting on update. Once we're done with that, we're going to click OK. So now if we make a change, nothing will happen. Let's go ahead and click on here on row C6, and we are going to select everything, and we're going to do the same number formatting. So we're going to hit number format, we'll go currency, we'll click on this negative value portion, leave it at 2 decimals, and hit OK. Now you'll notice that nothing changed. So in the last one, the columns all maneuvered when I did that. This time it didn't. What it should have done is it should have expanded, because you'll see here these little hashtags, these number symbols, mean that the number is larger than the column width. So if I expand it, you'll start to see the number now. Normally it would have expanded that for us, but because we put preserve cell formatting only and unchecked the auto adjust, then it did not do that. So we know it's working. Now, in order to calculate the variance, we're going to come over here into the values field and to our variance year over year column that we've entered. And we're going to right click and we're going to go back to that field settings dialog box. Now in here, we're going to go back to show data as, and then we're going to go into a calculation and we're going to click difference from. Now we can select year, and then we can select difference from the next year. So now you will see the difference of the 2018 production versus the 2017 production. So if I click OK, you will see that here. So you'll see that the difference in 2018 was that we grew 40 over 2017. And as you scroll over, you will see all the differences in each of the values. And you'll see here, here's a negative value. So it looks like in 2016, we were only at 17,643, but in 2015 we were in 18,120, which was a variance of 476. Okay, so we're going to take this one step further, and we're going to go ahead and do a percentage based on the years. So let's go ahead and bring production in the millions of US dollars down again, and then we're going to right click and go back to our field settings, back to show data as, and then we're going to go to percent difference from, and this will give us the percent difference from the next year. So it'll give us the growth year over year. So now we can come over here and we can go back to our first column and change the name here to percent growth. And if we look here, we have a percent growth of 0.20%. And overall, we have a percent growth of 7.23% from this year over 2017. If we come over to the right a little bit more, we might be able to see, so we'll see some different percent growth between some of the years. And it looks like almost about 7%. We're kind of looking at around 7.5%. We only have a 0.4% here, and then you can see the different negative results here. And then it looks like between 2015 and 2014, we had a bad year. We were down 124,000, where we were down negative 5.2%. Now, if you wanted to keep the same kind of formatting and keep these as these negatives as red, just like you have over here, what we could do is we can highlight these, and then we can go to number format. This time we're going to come down here to custom, and then we will choose this red one here. And this red one, we're going to take this $sign and we're going to delete it. We're going to come all the way over here and delete this parentheses and add a percent sign. So this will give us 2% symbols out. And actually, I'm going to just do one. We're going to do 1% symbol out on the positive side. Same thing over here. We're going to get rid of the dollar sign. And we're going to do 1% symbol out with a percent sign here. And this will give us different values in either red for a negative value or the black for a positive value. So if I hit OK, now you will see the change. It'll say negative 2.6, negative 3.0, just a little bit of other type of formatting. Okay, so we have our data set up the way we want it to see how we're doing overall in the different years. And what we'll do now is we will come over here and we will do a little bit of formatting. What I'm first going to do is I'm going to change the way the table looks. So I'm going to come up here to design and I'm going to choose a different table. I usually choose this one here. I'm going to choose this one and then I'm going to change the way this looks because I like a different color up here. I like a little bit of a softer blue. So I'm going to go ahead and right click here and go to duplicate. This will duplicate the style that we're looking at now. And what I'll do is I'll come over here to header row, click format, and then I'm going to format it the way I want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose color, and the color I'm going to choose is black, and I'm going to bold it. The next thing I'm going to do is go to my fill, and I'm going to choose a lighter blue for my fill, and I'm going to go with this blue here. I'm going to hit OK. Leave the rest of it the same. The rest of it I like. You can go back in and change these different things. Use the subtotals, the column subheadings, the row subheadings, the grand total. All that stuff can be changed to show a different way than what is already here. And then I'm going to click OK. Now you'll notice nothing changed. And this is because it doesn't automatically go to the design that you created. So in order to do that, you'll go all the way back to the beginning of your table designs and you'll see it right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. And now it has changed the way I like it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in banded rows and bounded columns. So this way it kind of gives us a grid line around each of the different columns and rows. And the next thing I'm going to do is come up here to the View tab, and I'm going to uncheck the grid lines. Now this gives me a nice flat white background where all I see is the grid lines that are in my table and nothing else. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert about 6 rows above. And once I select about 6 rows, I'm going to just hit insert and it's going to insert all those rows above my pivot table. The reason I'm going to do this is because I'm going to insert some slicers. And what a slicer is it's almost like a filter, but it's a button version of it to where you can basically click the button and it will slice your data into what your selection is. And so what I'm going to do is come here to pivot table analyze and hit insert slicer. You'll see a insert slicers box come up where you can click on the different slicers you want to bring in. So the 2 that I'm going to bring in for this one is the year and the economic activity. And then I'm going to click OK. You'll see they both came up here. First thing I'm going to do is bring over year and bring it here and then collapse it down so it's a little bit better, easier for me to read. I'm actually going to bring it to about here. Now you'll see all the different years in here, and if I was to click on 2011, if I move this out of the way, you will see only 2011 shows up. If I was to click on 2010 and 2011, you'll see the 2 come up with the 2 variances. If I unclick this, now you will just see everything. So then same thing here for economic activity. I'm going to bring this up here, I'm going to bring it here, and I'm going to make this a little smaller and then make this a little wider so we can see a little bit better. So again, if I click on accommodation and food, it will only show me the values for accommodation and food. You can click this to have a multi-select, so you can select more things than one if you want to do so, and then you would just click out the ones that you wanted, or you could, once you've selected some, you could just hit that little X up there and it will take all those filters out. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a freeze paint. And in order to do that, I'm going to go into cell B13 and I'm going to select freeze paint. What it's going to do is it's going to freeze column A and it's going to freeze everything above row 12 in the same spot. So as we scroll down, you'll still see all the headers in row 12, And then as we scroll to the right, you will see all of the economic activity categories in column A. I'm going to go ahead and rename row labels here to economic activities so that we know what this represents. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all my headers here in row 12, and then I did that by Shift Control right arrow to get everything, and I'm going to go over to Home, and I'm going to hit Center, Center, and Wrap Text. Now wrap text, what it does is it makes the text go above and below each other so that if you have a smaller column, it fits all the text still in that column without cutting any of it off. So as you'll see here, variance year over year has collapsed under each other, so that way we can still have a smaller column, but also be able to read the title. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert one more column above row 10. And once I do that, we are going to add in the years here. So we're going to make this a little easier for us to read. And in order to do that, we're going to put in the year 2018. And I'm going to merge these three cells. Now I know that all these values represent the values coming from 2018. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and format this a little bit. I'm going to bold it. I'm going to give it a backfill of a little lighter blue, and then I'm going to copy it and paste it down the row. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and change all the years corresponding. So now each of these is concatenated and you can see all the rows. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide rows 11 and 12 because we do not need those anymore. And once I've done that, I can see, I can better read what's underneath each one. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust some of these column widths. And then I'm going to add in some borders. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go ahead to more borders, and I'm going to choose a different color because I wanted to choose a darker blue. And I'm just going to choose a dark blue border. Choose this one here. And then I'm going to select the borders around the area that I want. So I'm going to hit OK. And so now you'll see, if I click off, this area is bordered out to where now you'll know that, oh, this is all 2018 stuff. And I can actually add another border here. I can go ahead and hit more borders. I can actually hit more borders again. I can add a border here. And it just gives it a little bit of a, it just borders this out so it's a little bit easier to read. And then what I'll do is I'm going to come here and I'm just going to hit format and apply the same formatting to each of my, I'm going to go ahead and click format, and I'm going to apply the formatting to each different area. So I'm going to scroll down and do that, and I'll do some of this adjustment and then be right back with you guys. Okay, so now we have it all nice and formatted. It looks good. It looks presentable. This is something now that we'd be able to go and give to an executive and let them and give them the numbers and help them to analyze the data and kind of talk to the data and show them how things are trending in different areas. So a couple things left that we would just want to make sure is, the first thing is we get rid of this pivot table field list. We just hit that little X and it'll get rid of it. So we don't need to see it anymore. If you ever need to bring it back, just make sure you have yourself selected somewhere on the pivot table go up here to design, go to pivot table options and then click on field list and it will bring it back. Next thing is if you go ahead and click on each of these slicers, and you can click on one and then control and click on the next one to select them both. Right click on them and you're going to go to size and properties, and over here when the size and properties box opens up, you want to go into properties and make sure that you click on don't move or size with cells. Just like the movement and sizing of the pivot table, if something is refreshed or changed in your data set, you want to do the same thing to where you don't to where your slicers don't move if the pivot table adjusts size. So or any type of data refresh on here. So that way any of the formatting you've done to those slicers doesn't get ruined. Now I'm going to go ahead and close that out. One last thing I like to do is go to right click and go to slicer settings. And here I like to do hide items with no data. So this is good for if something changes in your data set and say that the accommodation and food service activities portion here goes away in the new data set that comes in. And we no longer have that data available to us. Or there was a mistake and that wasn't supposed to be in there in the first place, and that data is now gone. It will go ahead and remove that from the slicer, so then people won't get confused and try clicking on it to see where that data is. So I go ahead and hit that hide items with no data in there. So I click OK, and this is ready to go. Normally what I'll do too is before sending this out to people, once I've put together some type of spreadsheet with a pivot table, I normally hide my backside data that I'm utilizing. And in order to do that, you just right click on the tab on the sheet below and you go and hit hide, and that will hide that from the view. And then, if you never need to bring it back, you can just right click again on any of the tabs and then hit unhide, and it will bring it right back. And you can select which one you want to bring. If there's multiple sheets that are hidden, you can select the ones that you want to unhide in order to work with the data. All right, guys, so there you go. That's how we create pivot tables in Excel and analyze our data. If you guys found value in this information, please make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and also share with those that you think could utilize this type of training. Also, in the comments below, guys, please make sure to let me know what you think. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I'll try to address them. If not, hopefully the people also that have worked through some of this stuff could also address them. And if there's any other videos that you would like for me to do, any other Excel tutorials you would like to see, go ahead and leave those in the comments below. I will also be working with SQL databases in the near future to where we can utilize some of that data structure to bring data from our SQL databases into Excel, like I mentioned before, and analyze that data. Again, guys, I hope that this helped you guys out, and I will see you next time on Tech Time with Zach.